The unemployment rate jumps, even though 55,000 extra people found a job last month. Canberra to test AI, and the Xi Biden summit ends successfully with one post-meeting hiccup. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Friday, the 17th of November, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Adam Lang.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, Adam, after the show, Sean Aylmer has an interview coming up with Luke Latham, who is the Managing Director for Australia and New Zealand at Airwallex, which is a supporter of Fear and Greed.
Yes, Michael. So Airwallex is an Australian success story. They've been changing the way international payments are made. And so they're moving into a new space, and that will see competition with the banks ramp up even more. So as you know, here on Fear and Greed, Michael, we are very pro-competition. I see this as good news.
Yeah, it is. It's a really good interview. And Sean, of course, will be back this afternoon for the afternoon report. And most importantly, Adam, he'll be back tomorrow morning as well for the weekend edition, which will be our first weekend edition where the three of us have been together for a few weeks now. Yeah. And you'll be stepping back into your position of the judge, and it will be me versus Sean, and hopefully me with a victory.
I've got my wig and cape ready, a little gavel, just to be the best judge I can.
I would love you to bring a gavel to the weekend edition tomorrow. That would just make my day, and you can just whack it down when Sean starts introducing too many stories into the biggest story of the week category. Anyway, we digress. We must get on with the show. The main story this morning, there was a surge in people employed last month, Adam, but that didn't stop the unemployment rate edging up to 3.7%, with the number of people participating in the workforce hitting a record high. The employment market actually surprised most economists by creating 55,000 jobs in October, which is more than double market forecasts. But the jobless rate did increase, as I mentioned, to 3.7%. The majority of new jobs were part-time, though full-time positions increased by about 17,000.
Michael, historically, these are incredible figures, and while the jump was a surprise, the Australian Bureau of Statistics Head of Labour Statistics, Bjorn Jarvis, warned it's better to look at the trend, and the average employment growth is around 31,000 people a month, which is lower than the normal average of around 35,000. The unemployment rate is up from its low earlier in the year of 3.4%, but still remains close to 50-year lows, and that's at 3.7, as you said. The participation rate, and this is interesting, that was a record 67%. Treasurer Jim Chalmers claimed to win, saying more jobs have been created under the Albanese government than any other first-term government in Australia's history, and that number of jobs created is 620,000.
Adam, you've had a very, very long career in business, and you have...
As a veteran.
That's right. You're a business veteran,
seasoned veteran.
You're a veteran of life, and you have you've run companies and you've done all kinds of different things. But if you go way, way, way back to your university days, and you were studying economics,
yes, Michael,
and it just
in the late 80s and the early 90s.
It just shows that you have a love of numbers and a love of economics and the way all this works. So it doesn't surprise me at all that you would be kind of digging through all of this data. And I need you to kind of explain a bit of this for me, because it was a surprise, as I mentioned, that there were so many jobs created. What would that mean then for interest rates? Because obviously this would be one of those measures that the Reserve Bank would be keeping a pretty close eye on.
Yeah, it's a critical measure, and it does support the case for another rate hike, but it may not be that simple. These strong employment figures, they do continue to run contrary to leading indicators of job growth being a lagging indicator. So that means they are one of the last things to turn. Yesterday, economists said employment growth will likely slow, so we'll see that number likely to come down, and the unemployment rate will probably creep up, maybe reaching between 4 and 4.5% in the middle of next year. So this could be as good as it gets. You know, you don't want that to be the case, but it could be.
Adam, on reflection, there is a very small chance that I might have given the impression that you are very old in my previous question. That was entirely unintentional.
Was that only on reflection, Michael, or in the moment as well?
Moving on, we're going to check local markets now, Adam. I think that's a good idea. The S&P ASX 200 finished yesterday down 0.7% to 7,058 points. It was a pretty ordinary day, despite the stronger than expected labour force data. There was 8 of the 11 sectors lost ground yesterday. The worst performing sector was the energy companies. That was largely due to the drop in the oil price. You had Santos losing 1.9%. Woodside was down 0.8%. The worst of the top 200, though, Adam, was AMP. And we've got a bit more on that one later because it's quite an interesting story. That one, mixed results from the banks, good performances from IPH and Lend-Lease, both up almost 3%. And poker machine manufacturer Aristocrat Leisure closed up 2.4%.
Yeah, Michael, in other corporate news, A2 Milk rallied, and that was despite a warning that China's infant formula market is in steep decline and will be in a more challenging place to do business this year. GrainCorp's share price jumped after it said it will pay a special dividend after ending the year to September 30 with a large cash balance. Sonic Healthcare dropped after it revealed it's set to acquire US medical technology company Pathology Watch for $200 million, and AACo rose even as it reported a net loss of $105.5 million in the half year.
Turning your eye to international markets now, Adam, what's going on?
Yeah, and so this is really important. Some distinguishing characteristics about our market and overseas. Inflation in Britain slowed to its lowest level in 2 years, with consumer prices up 4.6% in October from a year earlier. That inflation rate was pulled down by a drop in household energy costs as a price cap, and that's set every 3 months by the energy regulator, was lowered. Food inflation, which had taken over from energy as the main driver of inflation in recent months, that also slowed in October. Those UK figures follow the US inflation result of 3.2% on Wednesday night. If you look at inflation globally, Australia isn't actually doing so well. Prices are going backwards in China and rising less fast than Australia in the US, UK, Europe, Canada, Japan, and a whole bunch of other countries. Basically, Russia is the only G20 country with a higher rate of inflation. And as you mentioned before, Michael, oil prices are also lower after a US report showed a stockpile of crude, and gold is off a bit, and the Aussie dollar is buying a little over 65 US cents.
All right, we are well and truly underway. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Adam, the federal government has axed 50 road and rail projects across the country to save $7 billion, which theoretically would be kind of saved and used to pay for cost blowouts elsewhere. Infrastructure Minister Catherine King yesterday also said delivery times on some existing projects will face major delays. She was speaking after releasing the Albanese government's official response to the 90-day infrastructure review she commissioned back in May.
Yes, Michael, and that review recommended 82 projects be cut from the 10-year, $80 billion infrastructure investment program because they did not represent value for money. New South Wales was the hardest hit, losing 17 projects. Victoria followed with 12 projects, losing federal funding, while Queensland lost 9 projects. The review found that there has been $32.8 billion worth of cost blowouts in the existing $80 billion 10-year infrastructure investment program, and $14.2 billion worth were on projects that had not even begun construction.
It's not a good sign, is it, when the projects haven't even started yet and it's already blown out by $14 billion?
The scale of these numbers is incredible, Michael. And of course, I think we genuinely appreciate that we need infrastructure, but the things can get so out of control. I think the review is well worthwhile, and just taking a pause and saying, okay, what can we really afford to do and what must we do soon?
Yeah, really sorting out those priorities. Now, Adam, the Albanese government is rushing legislation through Parliament to restrict the movement of 84 people in the community.
Yes, Michael, and I think it's fair to say that the government was caught on the back foot by the High Court's decision on indefinite immigration detention this week, and they were smarting from an attack on Wednesday from opposition leader Peter Dutton over the issue. Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill said the government would rush through legislation. About 84 people will have new conditions imposed on them, including electronic location monitoring, ankle bracelets, a daily curfew, controls over where they can live and work and who they associate with. O'Neill said people found to be breaching the new rules would face a return to detention.
And one more story out of Canberra, Adam. The Albanese government is to undertake a 6-month trial of Microsoft's desktop artificial intelligence software suite with the aim of lifting public sector productivity and innovation.
Yes, Michael, artificial intelligence is now going to reach into the public service. The trial was announced yesterday after Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met Microsoft Chairman and CEO Satya Nadella in San Francisco on the margins of the APEC leaders meeting. According to the Financial Review, the trial of the 365 Copilot software will enable federal public servants to create Word documents as a first draft using generative AI. It will also analyse trends and create visualizations in Excel and rapidly prepare PowerPoint slides drawing on previous content. Copilot can summarize long email threads, suggest replies, and collate key discussion points from Teams video conferences. The tool can also scan hundreds of submissions and draw together the key themes. And Michael, even just describing that, you get a feel of just how useful this might be.
It's going to be really interesting to see how it is received within the public service.
Absolutely. And whether the 6-month trial afterwards, do they go, can we turn it off, or have we just become really used to this?
Absolutely. Now, Commonwealth Bank has agreed to sell its 99% stake in its Indonesian banking unit to overseas Chinese Banking Corp.
Yes, the price is about $220 million, and completion of the deal, subject to regulatory requirements, is expected in the second or third quarter of next year. Commonwealth Bank has been involved with the Indonesian banking unit for over 25 years, and the agreement ended years of speculation over the overseas China Banking Corp acquisition strategy in Indonesia, one of its 4 key markets.
I mentioned this one at the top of the show, Adam. AMP's share price tumbled 15% yesterday, more than 15%, nearly 16%, after management gave investors an update, including a decision to target sole traders and very small businesses with a new digital bank. The new division of AMP's retail bank will use technology built by UK neobank Starling, which has captured a 7% share of SME banking in the UK and is now selling its platform to incumbent banks.
Yeah, Michael, in investor days, you genuinely hope that the share price doesn't go down after one of those days. So I'm sure this is not what AMP had hoped. What they do hope is to launch in the next 18 months. They said its initial focus will be transaction and saving accounts. Lending will be added later. AMP said the opportunity for product innovation was created because the small end of business accounts had fallen through the gaps at major banks, where investment and focus are mainly on retail banking apps or the big end of town. The fall in the share price also reflected concerns that the bank's net interest margin has dropped.
Rio Tinto yesterday dismissed the former head of its aluminium division, Ivan Vella, with immediate effect for not following Rio Tinto's guidance on acceptable management of confidential information. This is really interesting. Vella, who has spent 2 decades at the mining giant, was scheduled to leave the company in December to become CEO of Australian battery minerals producer IGO.
Yeah, Michael, in an internal email, Rio wrote, the termination relates to actions that did not follow Rio Tinto's guidance on acceptable management of confidential information. Rio told Reuters that an external investigation has concluded that Ivan failed to maintain the standards expected of him relating to this topic. After 20 years, probably not the best way to go out.
No, I don't think so. All right, Adam, how about this? I'll be interested in your take on this story. McDonald's Australia has lost a court battle against Hungry Jack's over its Big Jack trademark, but won a related misleading and deceptive conduct claim against the chain after a costly 3-year bun fight.
Oh, very good. I was going to say the Battle of the Burgers.
Oh, that's true. You know what? This is one of those ones where you're just spoiled for choice, really, aren't you, in terms of the headline that you could use. McDonald's Asia Pacific alleged in a federal court case filed in August 2020, so it has been going for a while, that Hungry Jack's infringed its Big Mac trademark by promoting a limited edition burger in Australia under the, quote, substantially identical or deceptively similar Big Jack trademark. The trademarks relate to the burger's names and not their appearance, although Macca's argued in court that Hungry Jack's deliberately copied the ingredients and appearance of the Big Mac. This is all according to a report in the Sydney Morning Herald. It's a great story, isn't it?
It is. And Justice Stephen Burley, who presided over the fast food feud, concluded that Big Jack is not deceptively similar to Big Mac. He also found Hungry Jack's separate Mega Jack trademark was not deceptively similar to McDonald's Mega Mac. However, he said Hungry Jack's had engaged in misleading or deceptive conduct by suggesting in television advertisements that the Big Jack contained 25% more Aussie beef than Big Mac. So I think it's fair to say they both got a bit of a win.
You know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like it was a lawyer's picnic.
Takeaway order, thanks.
That's right. Okay, turning to international news. Chinese President Xi Jinping has used his meeting with US counterpart Joe Biden to warn that conflict between their two countries would have, quote, unbearable consequences, and that turning their backs on one another is, quote, not an option. The leaders of the world's two biggest economies met on the sidelines of the APEC summit in San Francisco in a bid to really stabilize the relationship between the countries and find some common ground on issues, big issues, things like fentanyl, climate change, and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, Michael, this was a high-stakes meeting. Biden told his Chinese counterpart that they had a responsibility to work together to ensure that their competition does not veer into conflict. Afterwards, Biden hailed the talks as some of the most productive he's had with Xi, describing areas of progress, including resuming military-to-military communications. He welcomed an agreement with China to counter the flow of fentanyl, but at the end of his press conference, Biden responded to one journalist asking if he still believed Xi was a dictator, which was something he'd said back in June. Biden said yes and described China's communist system as, quote, totally different than ours, end quote. And that got the headlines.
Of course it did. Now, finally, Adam, with Sean off this morning, I have taken a few little liberties.
Have you added your own touch?
Yeah, of course. We needed one last story, and that's...
I wonder what it might be.
It is going to be a story about space. It is a big surprise. Astronauts, Adam, working on the outside of the International Space Station.
Well, that would be a cool job.
Yes, it would, until you accidentally leave your tool bag outside.
Oh, whoopsie. Sorry, everyone.
And it floated off. And it's not the case of just being able to run after it or float after it and catch it, because once it's gone, it's gone. So NASA has acknowledged that the bag was lost and is now just floating through space about 400 above Earth. The best part is apparently you can actually see it if you've got a really good kind of pair of binoculars. The trick is to find the space station and then look around for a white, bright thing that's moving along kind of with it, I suppose. The best way to do that is to download the ISS Tracker app. So go to your app store and search for ISS Tracker, and you can actually just kind of see, and it tells you when the space station is next coming over your house, and you can run outside and have a bit of a squiz and see if you can find the toolbox as well.
Michael, do you know what I'm sensing here is an opportunity?
Mm.
If you were, say, Sidchrome, one of Australia's great hardware brands, or Stanley, you could sponsor an opportunity like that. Can you imagine people downloading the ISS Tracker and looking for Sidchrome in the skies?
Bunnings.
There you go.
Just like, yeah.
Commercial opportunity.
International Space Station brought to you by Bunnings.
Very good. Now, Michael, this actually, and I think you know this, is not the first time this has happened. Back in 2008, another astronaut lost a tool bag while performing maintenance on the outside of the space station. According to the New York Times, there are something like 35,000 debris objects in space, and many of them are being tracked to make sure they don't smash into other satellites.
That is really cool. I was doing a bit of research before the show this morning, Adam, on this. And even just when you search for, say, space junk, and there's some of the stories that come up, apparently they're getting closer to developing tractor beams, just like in Star Wars, that they would actually be able to use a tractor beam to potentially remove space junk out of space. There's another fantastic story that I saw as well from a week or two ago about the US fining a company about $150,000 because they failed to move an old satellite far enough away from Earth. So now it's just kind of floating around and causing a potential hazard. Like, space is very fertile ground for fantastic news stories, don't you think?
Never-ending sauce. Infinite sauce, Michael.
Yes, it certainly is. Now, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview, and Sean today is speaking with Luke Latham, Managing Director for Australia and New Zealand at Airwallex, which is a fantastic supporter of Fear and Greed. You will find it next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Adam, go and dust off your gavel and get ready for tomorrow morning's weekend edition.
Oh, this will be fun. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 17th of November, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and X. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.